So we're going to continue on from here for about 18 odd minutes. So again, we're not going to do the whole video, but we'll do the part where they interact, and there's a summary afterwards, or at least part of a summary.
Do you believe that
You're just making one point, that whole wasted 20 minutes was just you trying to say there's no objective morality without God.
Can we speak in a civil way?
Let's stop it.
Let's speak like in a nice way. I don't think there's a real need to get like defensive.
No, but the same way, don't tell me that's ridiculous, that's absurd. Right? I'm just trying to help you. We've got to your point. What it actually was, humans are special if there's a God. Okay,
thank you very much. Now, yeah, that's my point. Humans, that's exactly my point. Yeah. To put it in a simple way.
Yeah. If that God exists.
No, value judgment or value can be assigned to human beings if there's a God. I'm not making an argument for God.
What values?
I'm not making an argument for God at the moment. I'm saying let's just say if there's a God, if there's an alien, if there's a machine which assigns value to a human being and allows human beings to be more valuable in terms of whatever it may be.
Appeal to authority. There's a big thing that thinks you're valuable, so you're valuable.
Now, hold on.
My dad thinks I'm valuable, so I think we're good.
Sorry.
Okay, that's exactly what he did, right? If you listen again, he said that if it was an alien, if it was a big thing, or if it was God and he assigns value, then you're valuable. And so the atheist's response was a reductio to say, hey, well, if my dad thinks I'm valuable, then I'm valuable. What he's essentially pointing out that in Hijab's case is this is entirely arbitrary. The fact that you're appealing to Allah, not just God. Let's not use the word God. I was speaking to Stops about this. Let's hone in, because they're specifically speaking about Allah. They're not speaking about the Christian God or some other God. They're speaking about Allah. So whenever I hear God, I'm going to correct them and say Allah, and I'm going to burn it into them to say the word Allah. So that's what I'm going to start doing. So the claim here is that because Allah created you, you have value. Well, or that Allah says you have value, therefore you have value. Well, he's responded with, my dad says I'm valuable, so I'm valuable. So it's an appeal to authority here. Something that's bigger, better than me says I'm valuable, therefore I'm valuable. Well, that's not objective.
So you've misunderstood an appeal to authority. That's a fallacy that's only used in certain contexts.
No.
I said
You're just saying that God is an authority that assigns value. That's all you've said.
Spot on, right? He's very good at like summarizing what Hijab is babbling and battling to actually say coherently and concisely. This guy can just summarize in like 2 sentences.
Right? Well, why is God special as an authority? You have to explain why then being God gives that value.
Okay, well, hold on.
Okay, this is a very difficult thing for most theists, but in particular for Islam, to give why is God, the source of value. And now we'll see how he battles to articulate this.
Good question. So you're saying, if I say there's an entity that's transcendent and that has a certain attribute of, say for instance, rationality, then that it would make sense, rationally speaking, it would make sequential sense for me to say that entity could then endow another entity with the same or other kinds of attributes. So
my dad did that.
Okay, so that's completely irrelevant. The question that he's supposed to be answering is, why is it that other people should accept that Allah, because Allah gives value, therefore we take that as objectively the case. And all he said is because Allah's, more powerful than us, better than us? You can have a more powerful devil. The jinns are more powerful, right? Satan is more powerful. How do you establish that this is the God that you're supposed to be worshipping? And more importantly, how do you know that this God is good, which we're going to come to?
Okay, so
he had rational attributes and he endowed me with the same kind of thing.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Right. So your dad did that, yeah?
Yeah, he valued
What
me,
about his
so
dad?
I'm valuable.
What about his dad?
No,
No,
I mean, I never met him. Maybe
so if that goes on,
if
that goes on forever, where do we go?
Well, I mean,
Hijab is a master at red herrings. What about his dad? Right, like, okay, and you'll see the brain will get even more fried than this. We're starting to fry the brain, it's starting to sizzle now. But again, this is a tactic that he often uses when he doesn't know what else to say. He'll just bring up some random thing. What about your dad? How's that entirely relevant to the point? The point is he's provided you a counterexample, which is to say, hey, my dad gave me value, therefore I'm valuable because my dad said so. You, Mr. Muslim, say that you're valuable objectively because Allah said so. Well, I can say the same about my dad doing it, right? So Hijab now has to make an argument to say, no, that's not the case. Here's why Allah is different from your dad. Let's see if he even remotely gets close to doing that.
I mean, where do we go?
To the first human beings, yeah?
Oh, well, where do we go from your God?
We say that there's an entity that assigns moral value to other entities.
That's what humans do. My dad did that also. What's so special about your God?
Okay, that's a good question. So you're saying that human beings can
Okay, did you hear that? What's so special about your God? The response, that's a good question. Let's see if there's even remotely, even just an attempt at a substantial response to this, quote, good question.
assign moral value to other human beings.
Well, they do. I'm not saying that it's philosophically justified.
Okay,
but they
but
do.
the
Things assign value.
that's a good point.
Why is it so? Why do you think that
Now
there's
we
some,
move into-
Why do you think that there's some special justification
Yes,
that
I like
applies to your
that.
God?
No, it's a good point. So here, the answer would be, there's a difference between assigning subjective moral value and objective moral value. Now, I agree with you that I can assign subjective moral value to you, right? And you can assign subjective moral value, and your dad can do. But what I'm saying is, I'm making an argument that
You're
suggests
saying
that...
God's objective.
Yeah,
so it's value assignments are objective.
Yes, that's right.
And how do you know God's objective?
It's not that he's objective, it's that he's all knowledgeable. So it would
Okay, so
Excuse,
go on.
no, I was just saying, excuse me, there's something very wrong here. How can you get from the one to the other? You've just skipped it. You've just changed the whole game now again. What are you doing? I don't know what Hijab is thinking here. He's somehow trying to get out of it, and so he's doing anything to change the topic.
Well, he's bringing up what he thinks is God's omnipotence, right? Well, in this case, omniscience, sorry.
No,
That he's all knowledgeable, right? The fact that he's all knowledgeable, again, that's a claim that, I say God, Allah is all knowledgeable, is a claim that Muhammad would have to substantiate, which he can't do, because in order to say that, how would you know that? How would you know that it's all? But number two, even if he had a tremendous amount of knowledge, again, Shaitan could have that as well. How do you establish that you're not, in fact, being, hoodwinked by Shaitan and that you think is God, right? And when we read the Quran, the three of us, it's more likely if there was, some sort of transcendent being, it's Shaitan masquerading as Allah, trying to fool people, and actually we're going to get the prize.
How do you know he's all knowledgeable?
if we have, I'm not even making a claim that
But you did make a claim. You just made the claim that he's omniscient, that he's all knowledgeable. So again, maybe 3 years ago you didn't know what a claim was when you uttered a statement about ontology. That's a claim, my friend. Maybe
Also,
at least you might have understood that. I think Hamza's still battling with that one.
he's saying that objective is different to subjective, and a human is subjective and his God is objective. That's also a claim.
Yeah, well, exactly. And what the guys ask him to do is to, show that's the case.
of God's existence.
Sounds like you're making a claim. Oh, you're an atheist.
If we take for granted,
You're an atheist.
come on, man.
You just said you're not making a claim that a God exists.
I don't need to make a claim for God's existence to believe in it.
Wait. Wait.
What? What did he just say? I don't need to make a claim about God's existence to believe in him. That would be true if you were doing an internal critique of a theist worldview and you were not a theist. But if you are a theist, that is a completely incoherent statement. I don't have to believe in a God to do an internal critique of Islam. That's true, but I'm not a Muslim. You are.
Wait. Can I just check in this conversation?
Just watch his face as well. Just pay attention to the body language, the face of Hijab as we go through this, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe there's a God?
Yes, sir.
All right, that's your claim. All right, fine.
No, it's not my
Okay.
claim. I
You're
believe that's
claiming
what I believe.
You're claiming
Look,
also that
He's got a great way of
Excellent.
cutting through everything, right? He will summarize all the babbling and rambling that Hijab will do into a couple of short phrases.
I forgot how good this guy is.
God's objective.
I'm
Fine.
saying, do you understand the term conditional? What is a conditional, sir?
It's a contingent variable. On
Thank you very
something
much.
that exists.
So what does it usually start with? What word in English?
Well, I mean, answer your question.
If, yeah? Now the word if necessitates a conditional state, right? So I'm not saying that, I'm not standing next to you, sir. I'm making an argument for God's existence. I'm saying, exactly, we can have an argument on that some other time, no problem.
Yeah, what he's trying
Sorry,
to do
I'm just
here.
laughing.
Yeah, what he's trying to do is say, hey, I'm presenting this argument, even if I don't believe in this in a God, I'm trying to present this argument as if I were a non-believer. That's what he's attempting to do, although he just can't articulate it. But actually, he again, that would be disingenuous because he is a believer, and the guy on the left will actually ask him a couple of questions shortly that'll cut through this again and explain to him what he needs to do to actually demonstrate the claim that he's making, and in fact even attempt to answer the question, right? Because the question was, How do you know that God is objective, or what makes God objective as opposed to subjective, right?
Problem. But we could do that. It's not what I'm saying. If the condition here is this,
It's a rather big if, isn't it?
no problem. For you, it's a big if. For small, it's
No,
an
it's
objective
an
thing.
if you won't even answer. You're like, yeah,
I'll
I'm not
answer
even going
it.
to try today.
But we'll answer it.
Well,
So we'll do it. I have no problem.
Well, let's go ahead.
We'll do one thing at a time, though. If God exists, then human beings have objective moral frameworks, and they can have objective value assigned to them.
Why?
If you don't have that, you can't have that.
Okay, sorry. You're saying that God assigns objective moral value. All right.
Yes, sir.
Why is it objective just because it comes from God?
Because our definition.
Okay. I don't know how clear it's coming
yeah.
through. This is a beautiful question. Why is it objective? Because it comes from Allah. We'll reframe God to Allah. Why is it objective? Because it comes from Allah, right? And now you need to present an argument for this. So let's see if we remotely get close to this.
Definition of God.
Okay, now we are getting to a different one.
Yeah, we are.
All right.
Or we can get into a theoretical definition of something that
I'm just asking why.
even from an atheistic perspective,
Why?
that doesn't.
He picks it up immediately.
Yeah. He's very sharp.
Yeah, why does this God, why is the
Even
stuff
for,
that he
even,
says
for,
objective?
even for you, sir, as a, let's say an atheist, I'm not sure if you're an atheist or not, but even as an atheist, you can appreciate that if I'm saying if, and then defining God as I please, then theoretically you can appreciate the argument.
I could make 1,000 ifs.
Yes, sir, I agree.
But let's make the one that you're actually
Yes, sir.
The other thing that he doesn't realize is he's begging the question, which this guy will bring up shortly. If it's the case that God exists or Allah exists, and I define him as I please, well, anybody could say that about anything. I define whatever, right? The Roman, the Greek God as I please. Well, then he provides objective moral values because I've defined it that way. Well, congratulations on a circular argument that nobody who's rational would remotely accept. So we haven't even got close to. We're actually still in fallacy land here. We haven't even got to a coherent response to this at this stage.
Right, so why are God's moral assignments
So what we
objective?
say is because of the nature of what we define as God, yeah, whether that be objectively or subjectively for now, that's aside the
Okay, did you hear that? How we define God, whether that's objectively or subjectively. But my claim is that God is the objective standard. At this stage, the brain is starting to really short circuit, right? The words are just coming out here. I don't think, the mouth is moving and I don't know that the brain is in connection with the mouth. It's just like words are coming out here in almost random fashion.
We said if. So we were not making absolute claims. We said if. So if God is all-knowing and all-wise, then it follows that he would know the best condition for human beings and
Best, you're now making it different. Best by what standard?
by his own standard.
No, that's
Oh, did you hear that? And he said it straight away, right? By his own standard. Okay. The fact that Hijab doesn't realize what's going on here is quite telling. And I don't know now whether, if he had the same discussion again, whether he'd do any better 3 years later.
circular. What you're saying is
Why is it
God
circular?
knows the best, right? Because if he knew everything, he would know the best, right? You have
Yes.
to, well,
That's not secular, sir.
Of course it is.
That's not.
What the fuck?
Oh, I told you this was an epic fail, right? This is probably his most epic fail where the brain just went to mush, right? That's not circular. That is the textbook definition of a circular argument, and the response is that's not circular. And again, remember the comments, right? The other thing I wanted to remind people of as we go through this, because it'll be lost on people if you go and look at some of the comments here, right? The fact that, okay, it's taking time to bring up the comments, but the fact that there were comments that thought that Hijab did well in this was probably, like I say, one of the worst displays that's ever happened. But I think because the brain was fried a little bit earlier, or started to fry, and we'll see that culminate shortly.
of course it is.
No, it's not, sir.
Of course it is.
No, it's not, sir.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
How does the best relate to knowing everything? The
You've
best is not a
misunderstood.
standard.
No.
Having a superset of a vast amount of knowledge,
That's
right,
completely not circular
doesn't
argument, sir.
assign a value to it. What you're
That's beautifully explained as well. It doesn't matter how much you know, that doesn't assign a value. The value needs to be assigned in some other way, not just by saying that something or a being, or in this case Allah, knows a certain amount or even knows everything. That doesn't follow that from that value can be extracted, and certainly not objective value, because that's the claim, right? If he said subjective value, well, nobody's going to argue with that. But that's not the claim that he's making. It's the objective value. Objective meaning mind independent, i.e. that it's a fact of the world irrespective of opinions, and that would include God's opinion.
You're looking for is value, right? Saying someone knows a huge amount doesn't mean they know best. Now, you need to demonstrate that this is best.
In the context of, if I say to you, look, what is the best way of demonstrating to a child that 2 + 2 = 4? Yeah? You would come to your own conclusion as a sentient moral being as to how that could be the case. What I'm saying now, I'm using that in the context of God. What is the best way that God does things? That depends upon certain definitions, which God himself puts in place. That's not circular.
Well, that's circular.
That's not circular.
Yeah, God says what's the best because he thinks it's best. That's circular.
Why is that?
Okay, how do you know these things are best?
How do you know things are best?
I asked you the question. You said God does things which are best. How do you know that what God does is best? How does God know what he does is best?
Right, so our definition of God.
Thank you.
So now the brain fry really starts. How does God know what God knows is best? Or in this case, Allah. Translate God to Allah, right? And
No,
listen how
actually,
often...
we can just put the link in here. There's no big deal.
Oh, you can, yeah. Let's just do it here. You can join us. Here we go. If you want to come and join us, here we go. You are most welcome. We're just popping the link in there.
We both did it.
There you go. We both did it, so that's absolutely fine. If you pop up the reaction, you can come and give us your view here. Okay, so like I say, this is the first time he's asked it in this particular phrasing. How does God know? How does God know? What did he say there? Let me just go back now, because just to hear quickly.
How do you know that what God does is best? How does God know what he does is best?
How does God know what he does is best? Okay, number one at 15 minutes 54. How many? Let's count up how many times it happens.
Definition of God is
yes, that's circular. Your definition is that this is what he is. That's circular.
No, that's
yes, it's circular.
Do you understand
You've been
what
over
circular?
this 3
Sir,
times.
you don't
Every time
understand
it's
what
circular.
No.
So here's what I'd like you to do. How does God know that what God knows is best?
Number two.
Go ahead.
Okay, delaying tactics aren't going to help you either at this stage. You know, you just don't know what to say next. Right, so that's twice he's asked now.
My friend, what I was going to say to you is a circular argument is when you, excuse me, sir, because you're now conflating terms and using philosophical.
You're not answering a simple question. Let me ask you.
No, hold on.
How does God know that what God knows is best?
Three.
Just answer that question.
Okay, let me answer you. Before I answer you,
Let me answer you. But before I answer you, I'm going to give you a philosophical lesson on what circular arguments is so that I've got time to think and I can hopefully steer away from having to answer this question.
God know that what God knows is best.
Okay, so that's the fourth time he's asked, right? I'm just keeping track here in case everybody else forgot.
being respectful to you, sir, so I expect the same treatment.
I asked the question 4 times.
Okay.
Right? So
But before,
And fascinatingly enough, he remembers that he has asked 4 times and I'm counting and it is 4 times, right? Even in the heat of the discussion, he remembers that he's done it 4 times.
we go to your question, we have to go to the assumption of your question and your claim that you said before. You said that that's circular. Now, what is a circular thing? Circularity is when you try and prove the existence of something or something using the same thing. That's not what I've done here, sir. What I've done is I've said that God, our definition of God, is that he is, for example, all knowledgeable, all wise, that he is, let's say, all good, yeah? Al-Bar, he's all good.
Okay, so all good is begging the question, right? The whole point under discussion is, A, is he good such that he can, if you could demonstrate that he's all good, your Allah, then you would be in a position to say that whatever he says is good because you've established that he's all good. So it follows that anything he says would be all good, right? Because it couldn't be any other way. But that's part of the point that's under discussion here.
But that's why I'm dying to hear how he's going to finish this sentence. Because I can't remember.
As a result of those attributes, he's able to assign goodness, he's able to assign wisdom, he's able to assign
Yeah, he's nodding. He knows that. He's going to say it now himself.
knowledge and these things. That's not a circularity, that is a full assignment. For example, if I say to you,
It's called assignment. It's part comedy here as well. You've got to just laugh sometimes, right?
look, I'm a loving guy, yeah, or I'm a knowledgeable guy, I can disseminate.
Go, whoa, 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 those are two different things. If you could demonstrate you were a loving guy and the only things you did was, demonstrate love, then we could say, sure, but that's the whole point. How do you know what loving is? You could say you're knowledgeable, you could demonstrate that by uttering, a number of facts about the world, but how do you demonstrate objectively that you're loving? You need some standard, and the moment you appeal to a standard outside of Allah, well, then Allah is not the source of the objectivity, in which case he's subject to it like the rest of us, and so he's unnecessary, part of the Euthyphro dilemma.
Disseminate knowledge. That's called either assignment, or if something is coming from one place and going to another. Circularity.
This is just babbling nonsense at the moment. It's utter nonsense, right? And this is what happens. And again, not all Muslims do this, but that's why I wanted to highlight this video, because he's so cocky and because he made a big challenge at the beginning of the video. That's part of why we're doing this, right? Just to show that in a number of occasions, I'm going to be charitable, a number of occasions, he's just babbling nonsense here. And, the Muslims in the chat here, which again doesn't seem to be loading, just sort of take this all in. They're not following this at all. But fortunately, though, we brought up one of the comments where there was a Muslim who actually pointed out that he got the liar's paradox, which will come up just now. He got that wrong. So at least there was at least one. And that's the sort of people that, I'm hoping that are listening and that sort of stuff, not the people who don't understand what's going on here. And because Hijab uttered some rambling words, think that he said something substantial. But when you ask them, of course, you don't get any response.
No, but this is exactly the point that you made, where you said that the one guy who made the comment, you will never get him to admit that Hijab made a single mistake. Nothing at all that he did is wrong. Nothing. And you will not get them to admit this. There are people like that.
Yeah. And again, Reactionary, if you want to stop and, comment at all, just let us know, right?
Is when you try and prove something using something. The same thing. Like if I ask you, why is the sky blue? And you say it's because it's blue, that's a circular argument, sir. So now you educate.
That's exactly what he did in different words with Allah, and he doesn't realize it.
Allah says he's all good, and that's why
I'll go ahead and ask
good.
me the
I
same question.
understand much more about it than you do.
Okay,
How does
maybe
God
you do.
know that what God knows is best?
How many times now?
five?
That's the fifth time of asking, right? How does God know what God knows is best? Now, if you think about it, that's a bit of a tongue twister, and you've got to stop and actually, let it, think about the question, really. If you've not heard it before, now, okay, it's happened 5 times, but he hasn't been listening. But if you stop and ask, think about it, even as a Muslim or any theist, right, you've got to go, okay, how do I know that, right? It's not something that you can, answer, instantaneously. It takes a moment of thought, or at least for those of us who are thoughtful.
How does God know? Because he's all knowledgeable.
I can see your microphone flashing. If you want to say something, you just need to blurt it out.
Sorry, whose microphone?
I saw Reactionary's microphone coming
Oh,
on.
okay.
I thought he wanted to say something.
okay.
Because
Yeah,
if you want to
just
say
jump in.
something, you just need to jump.
Yeah, I'm not
Well-
looking there, so go on.
Sorry, his question was, how does God know that what God knows is best, right?
Yep.
So
Good,
it wasn't
yeah.
like, how does Hijab... Well, ultimately, I guess the question is really, how do you know that, how does God... How would you explain that God knows? That
Well,
what
there's
God
two
knows
separate questions.
is best?
Yeah, there's two questions. One is, how do you know as a human? And number 2, how does God know?
Yeah.
Right, so there's 2 questions there, but he's asking the second one, which is, how does God know what God knows is best? In other words, how
Yeah.
could God demonstrate to himself that he knows whatever he knows is best, i.e. good? What is he going to do as God, right? So that's the question that's being asked of Hijab here.
But you see, to me, that question doesn't really make sense. Because, all right, he's asking you to assume that God does exist. And assuming that God does exist, how then does God know that what he knows is best? Okay?
Correct.
So,
Yep.
which is the second part of the situation. So in this
Correct.
part of the situation, if we assume that God does exist, we are assuming that he is God in his nature, which is perfect.
Ah,
His
no.
knowledge is perfect.
That's where, that's
With
where
human-
that's where the issue is coming in. Okay, what we're not granting is that his nature is good. That's the argument that you as a Muslim need to bring forward, that Allah's nature is all good. Or in other words, that he's not shaitan in disguise. Because what you're labeling as God is simply a powerful being. We're not granting you all of those attributes. The attribute under discussion is omnibenevolence, if you accept that term, and I think at least some Muslim philosophers do, but if you take it that he's the equivalent of that in Islam, then that's the point under discussion. How is it that he can assign objective moral value, i.e. what is best? So even if he exists, We don't
Yeah.
grant that what he's saying is best. That's the argument that needs to be provided.
All right. Again, to me, that it's taken a step forward and then taken a step back by asking that question. Because to assume that God exists, we must assume that He is perfect in His knowledge. Right?
Why?
Yeah, that's not what we're granting, right?
To be God, you must be perfect. It's all supreme in all of your attributes.
Why?
Right?
No, but what you're doing is you're now defining something into existence and then saying, look, that's why he is like that. But you've just defined it that way.
How can you be God and not be perfect?
That's
Okay,
exactly
quite
the
easy.
question.
Well, I'll tell you how. Let me tell you, Reactionary, because you can mislead humans into believing that you're something that you're not, like Shaitan could do. And how do you, as a human that is fallible and can make mistakes, how can you tell the difference? Oh, he's on mute there. Maybe he's trying to get the other guy in. So that's the whole question under discussion, right? So we're granting that there's something that you call God, i.e. that there's this powerful being that created the universe and humans. We're granting you those two things at this stage as an internal. We're granting that for the sake of the argument. And now you have to establish that this God is all good. And we're not granting you that he is just because you call him or it's God. We're only granting you that there's a powerful being that created humans. Now you need to establish this other attribute, because the claim that's being made here is that he objectively assigns value, i.e. he says what is good. Why does anybody who does not believe in that particular God have to accept that claim? Now let's carry on, and when you come back, we can continue with that one.
Knowledgeable, sir.
No, that's circular. You're saying God uses God's knowledge
Your
to know
question,
what's best.
your question
That's
is circular.
circular.
Your question
No.
is circular.
You see, a beautiful summary again. He just, he'll listen, and then he'll just quickly summarize it that everybody who's paying attention can hear it. And he summarized exactly what Hijab is doing. And of course, Hijab's response is, no, I'm not doing that. But that's quite clearly what he's doing to anybody who's got even an elementary understanding of this.
You know your question?
You know that what you're saying
hold
is
on.
hopelessly circular.
So you're saying, how
I'm
does...
just asking
hold
for
on,
a
hold on.
simple question.
Yeah, go on, sir.
How does God know that what God knows is best?
Keep an eye on Hijab's whole
Number
demeanor,
6.
right? That's number 6, yeah?
Okay. Good question.
How many times has he said a good question? At least 3 times.
I'm only asking for the 6th time.
Okay. Your question is tantamount to you asking, can God lift a rock that he can't...
No, it's not.
Yes, it is, sir. Your question...
No, it's not. Okay, so now the brain is really fried, right? Now he's made the elemental mistake of thinking that what the atheist has asked is a paradox, and it's in fact not. And it's crucial for a theist, or in this case a Muslim, to be able to articulate how it is that you can establish that God is all good.
And this
I
is
think
what happens
Reactionary
if you're off
dropped
script.
off.
Yeah, I noticed.
Hopefully
if
he'll be back.
if you're taken off script, you're lost.
Yeah.
Your question itself is self-defeating.
Correct. That's why you don't have an answer.
Yes, no. If you ask...
Okay, but that's again key, right? The question is self-defeating in the way that it's being posed to Hijab if he doesn't have an answer. If he had an answer to it, then it wouldn't be self-defeating. But the fact that he doesn't, and he's recognizing that it's self-defeating, well, that's the end of the argument, right? But we'll see that, of course, it's far from the end. He will hang on tenaciously, even though he hasn't got anything to hang on to.
Oh,
Ask me.
Benny's a
Badly,
warner
I'm-
back.
So again, feel free to join in any time, Reactionary, because obviously we were having a conversation. You might have dropped out there a bit. Hopefully you're not bringing Benny in, because we've had our discussions with Benny and we found that he's not able to reason effectively. So, and you are, right? We might disagree, Reactionary, but at least I think we can have a sort of a reasonable discussion with yourself, and hopefully the gentleman you're bringing in. But our man Benny, I'm afraid, no, not so much. And we've given him about 4 tries at least, so...
What was his
have an
character?
answer.
Really?
Oh, I don't remember.
I can't remember.
No.
Entire worldview rests
hold
on
on,
this.
hold on.
Your claim was God knows best. You just
No,
can't
my
explain to
friend.
any person who knows that what God knows is
Let me
best.
tell you. I'll
Okay,
ask
I'll
you...
ask for the 8th time. How
the
does
8th time,
God
it was-
I think it's the 7th, but it's close enough. 7th, 8th. By this stage, I would have lost count as well.
know
It was
that
4
what
times.
God knows is best?
I'm telling you
I've
now,
been
your
counting everyone.
question is second.
His question is circular. Dear, oh dear. Now the brain is entirely fried. And just look at the face, you're right, especially in the mouth part of it. there's this sort of arrogance now that I have no clue what I'm doing. I think I know what I'm talking about, but I haven't got an answer, so I've got to say something to, so that I don't sound like I'm clueless.
You can't answer the question.
Your question is second. Why would
you
I
can't answer the question?
Yeah, why? I can't answer
so
the
you can't answer the question.
Of course not.
When you think it's odd for a religion...
Of course not. It was very quick, right? You've got to pick up on these things. They're very quick. That's a complete concession that his argument is just unfounded. It's entirely speculative. Now, there are arguments that you could bring, right? He just had no clue about it, and he didn't have a clue as to what the atheist was asking, even though it was like 7 or 8 times that it was asked. And he even said, good question, at least 3 times. And I'm pointing that out specifically in this case, because Hijab is such a thug and does this to other people. And I wanted to point out this video where he has a complete brain fry, and at no point does he recognize how ridiculous he's sounding at the moment, and he will attempt to defend himself at the end as well.
Religious person that follows what God knows, that he can't tell you how God knows that what God knows is correct. That's odd. I tell you what that's called blind faith.
Okay, blind faith.
Yeah.
Well, hold on.
Something.
Yes,
My
sir.
opinion. It's not major, or we're not asked as humans to know how God does things, right? What we're asked to do is basically to believe or follow what he asks us to
His
do.
question was,
Okay, but the problem with that is if you're asked to believe what he tells you and you don't have a rational justification, then you can't put forward a rational argument. All you could say is, hey, I believe it on blind faith, as the atheist pointed out. But if you're somebody who thinks they have good reasons for believing in Allah, then you want to give those reasons to other people. That makes sense, right? And the Quran clearly suggests that it's a book with reasons in there that are or should be persuasive to other people. So you can't take the position of the guy out of camera here and say you believe it on faith, or you believe it because you're told to believe it. That is blind following, right? So that's not something you can do. Again, Reactionary, jump in at any stage here. Let us know if your other man is coming along. But obviously we can, feel free to comment further on this. But I think the major question here is he's alluding to the Euthyphros dilemma, although he doesn't use those words at this stage. But he's simply asking the particular question because Hijab wants to take, or doesn't know, or either didn't know at that stage, or has taken the horn of, it's because God is good, essentially, right? Which is an arbitrary statement that you need to demonstrate in some way.
how does God know what God knows is best? Yes?
Okay, at least he's understood the question now, so he's repeated it. So that's the 9th time that's been said now, I think, 8th or 9th.
It's like...
His answer is he uses his knowledge,
So,
which is circular.
would you like me to answer your question?
I would pay money at this point.
Okay, so here comes in the money thing now, right? And he's even praying for it too, so you never know, you might convert him, but not quite today.
I've only asked you.
Your question, let me...
Sorry, Reaction, you wanted to say something there?
Yeah, no, I was just laughing with you.
Yeah, okay.
just ask the question again. Let me reframe the
Do
question.
you think we're going to get an answer? I'm like,
okay, sir.
I'll put some money down to see
You're
if
being arrogant,
I have
sir.
an old £5 note. and
the
I'm willing
man
to
is...
put in
Okay.
to see if you
Being
actually
arrogant
answer the question
doesn't
this
help
time.
you. Okay.
Well, I'm being patient is what I'm being. I've asked
Your
9 times.
question was, how does God know that what God knows is best? Now, anyone who knows anything about logic, anyone who knows absolutely anything about logic, would know that this question itself is like asking a circular question. It's like
I don't know what a circular question is. Maybe you can ask one, but a circular response is what we're normally talking about. But it's not a circular question. Oh dear. I told you this was an epic fail, and at this stage his brain is completely
I
fried.
can't even remember. I think I need to make this into a meme somehow. You're asking a circular question. That's why you're failing.
Yeah.
like asking, how do I know that I know? It's a paradox in itself.
No, if I ask you, how do you know that you know, you would then
Exactly.
present me with some reasons why.
Yes.
And that's what you're being asked to do for God's, value, if you like, or God's goodness. Or not God, I keep saying God, Allah. Not God, because there's multiple gods, but Allah.
Well, it's the
right?
same
It's
thing.
specifically
Allah,
talking
God.
about your Allah.
Allah is just the Arabic for God.
Yeah,
The
but
Islamic
I like
God.
to remind that, because when I have discussions
To rub
with
it
people,
in,
they want to
but
go
then
to
I
a
would use
generic
Islamic
God, right?
Islamic
Yeah,
God.
you could say it that way too. Yeah.
Islamic God, yeah.
In itself, let me ask you a question. If I ask you today, the question is paradoxical basically. If I ask you a question right here and right now,
I'm not hearing an answer.
no, excuse me, sir, excuse
I think
me.
you're
No,
fine.
your question is paradoxical.
You don't know the source of
Do you
your
know
own
what
moral
par-
authority because you don't know
Sir,
how God knows
sir,
or how He could.
sir,
Did you hear that? It's because he's trying to talk over him all the time, right? You don't know the source of your moral authority because you don't know how he could know. And that's like a key phrase. And, a Muslim that's perhaps more informed on the topic could try to mount an argument. I mean, I've asked some Muslims, again, I haven't asked philosophers, Muslim philosophers, but maybe there are some out there, and they could answer this in some way. But I think it's a significant challenge to Allah. Let's carry on anyway.
If I said to you,
It's an old £5 note, but it's yours if you can answer the question.
no, it's a paradox. You can never answer a paradox. A paradox is unanswerable by its nature.
All right, so when you ask the source of his moral authority, he goes, you can never know, it's a paradox.
A paradoxical
so don't pretend you have a reason
Sir.
for it.
Okay, so there's the key point, right? He said the source of your moral authority. So if you're going to say the source is God, but then you're going to go, well, okay, by what standard is God the source? And you're going to say because he's God, that's entirely circular. And that's the point there, right? If you said, okay, because God appeals to the state of nature out there, nobody really wants to do that because then the source is outside of God. And then we can bypass that, and it's possible that we could come to know that source without God. So he doesn't want to go down that route. So he wants to say that God is the source. But when he's asking, how do you know it's the source? His simple answer is because he tells me he's the source, or because he is. And that's entirely uninteresting.
Excuse me, sir. You know what, and I know. Either you know you're deceiving the public, or you're ignorant.
Oh,
and I
yeah, I'm
have to
deceiving
say-
the public by asking a simple question which I haven't an answer for.
Basically,
10 times of
if a
answering.
liar says to you, "I'm telling the truth," do you believe him?
Okay, so he's got this wrong, right? I want to bring this up just so that we get it out here. Liar paradox, right? And the reason he gets this wrong is because, in my view, his brain is fried at the moment, right?
Yes. Yeah, he's totally blocked.
He really doesn't know what's going on at this moment in time, right? And the
He never-
correct way
by
to
the way,
frame
sorry,
go on.
the guy never let Hijab answer the question once, right? Each time he's, but I can understand why though, because Hijab, he goes through this long preamble and starts preparing an argument for the camera, and by the time he starts on the actual answer, the guy has got fed up and he jumps in saying something. But that's all I just wanted to say. Hijab
Well, I don't know how-
hasn't had a chance to
He
answer
asked
the
him
question
8
completely.
times. He asked him.
But he
8
didn't actually
times.
answer it. He didn't get to answer
He
it.
gave him time to answer it, but Hijab never answered it. He always says, "Well, before I answer, I'm gonna," and then he goes off on a
Yes.
tangent. He
I agree,
never
I agree.
went there. He never went to answer the question. He didn't even try.
I agree with that.
All right, just so we know, right? The liar's paradox, and here's the Stanford Encyclopedia, which is, I think, normally a good reference. I'll post it in the main chat there. There's the paradox itself. And the correct way to phrase this is the first sentence in this essay is a lie. So if a liar says to you, this sentence is a lie, that's a paradox, right? That's the correct way to phrase it. But if we go back just a few seconds here, notice what happens here. And this will be crucial, right? Because Hijab is going to bet money on it and not hand the money over. And this will be dishonest. And we'll clearly explain why.
Either you know you're deceiving the public, or you're ignorant.
Oh,
and I
yeah, I'm
have to say-
deceiving the public by asking a simple question which I haven't an answer for.
Basically,
10 times of
if a
answering.
liar says to you, "I'm telling the truth," do you believe him? Yes or no?
Yeah, I can look for
Yes or no?
evidence.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes
Yes
or
or
no
no? I've said it 4 times. Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no?
only yes or
Please,
no
I'll give you £10. No, I'll give you £10.
There you go.
So this is just belligerent, right? So this is just steamrolling to try and save face here. But not only is he not going to give him £10, he's going to take out a £5 which he won't give over. Remember what the liar's paradox is. I want everybody not to forget it, right? The liar's paradox is this sentence is a lie. If you utter that to somebody and you say to them, hey, if a liar said to you, this sentence is a lie, do you believe it? The correct response is, well, that's a paradox. I can't answer that. That's the correct phrasing, and that would be the correct response.
You had 5 and it was ripped.
Sorry, Rob.
I'll give you the new one. No, I'll do it.
Remember, he did say 10, right? But he's got
No,
5.
I'll give you. Tell me.
Because the brain is
if you answer
fried,
the question
he's
with your
forgotten about that.
muddy hand, I'm going to ask you now. If a liar says, this is to expose his paradox. If a liar says, "I'm telling the truth," do you believe him? Yes or no?
Okay. If a liar says, I'm telling the truth, do you believe him, yes or no? The straightforward answer is no. Right? He's a liar. Why? Why is that's an easy answer. That's not the paradox. Remember, the paradox is this sentence is a lie, not I'm telling the truth. He's got it wrong. He asked, is this sentence, am I telling the truth? So obviously a liar doesn't tell the truth. So the answer is no, it's not a paradox, and the money should be given. So let's see what happens.
Don't touch my money.
No. Give me the money.
You don't believe him?
No. Give me the money.
That is the correct answer, right? So the Hijab asked, do you believe him? He said no, which is entirely the correct answer. Hijab reversed the paradox, got it entirely wrong because the brain was fried at this stage. He offered the money, and now he's not giving it, right? I mean, I don't know about you, Reactionary, but to me, if somebody does this, that's not an honest thing to do.
Give me the money. What a liar!
Do you agree with the assessment, at least, of what happened in the sense that he got the paradox wrong? He offered money if he could answer the question. Because he phrased it incorrectly, the guy was able to answer the question trivially easily because it wasn't the paradox, and so he should have passed over the money. But because he's not following this at all now, he now wants to hold on to the money, right? And of course, this guy gets a bit upset now, and I think possibly rightly so.
He's like, £10 if you can answer the question. He then pulls out £5. I answer the question, and he won't give it to me.
Let me explain to you.
Okay, does a liar, would you believe a liar? I wouldn't believe a liar, especially one who's like, give you money if you answer my question.
I know you're shaking.
Would I believe you? No, you're a liar.
Okay.
Somebody saying something?
That's funny.
Yeah, it gets a little
funny
bit...
how he's using the paradox against hijab.
Yeah, exactly. It gets a little bit heated here because I think he's rightly perturbed that he did answer the question and hijab won't give the money. So again, this goes towards hijab's intellectual dishonesty in my view, at least in this scenario.
Okay, no.
I said no, give me the money.
Calm down, sir.
All right, should we trust liars?
No, calm down, sir. Calm down, sir. Calm down, sir.
Why don't I have... Did I answer the question?
You're acting weird,
Did I
sir.
answer the question? Did I answer the question? Did I answer the question?
Notice that nobody else wants to answer him as to whether he answered the question right. They're either too scared or, more likely, they don't even know what's going on here. That's probably the more likely one. They weren't following. There were some words being exchanged here. It's like if two theoretical physicists were talking about advanced, nuclear fission or something. I'd be listening, but I know that they'd be saying things to each other, but I wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't go interject and say. And one of them turned to me and said, "Hey, did that guy give me the correct phrase?" I'm like, "No clue, dude." Right? And if you're honest about it, you're going to say no clue, right? So that's probably what's going on here. Either they don't want to contradict hijab, but most likely none of them know what's actually going on here.
Question.
Rob,
Sorry?
Reactionary, what would your reaction be if you were asked the same question?
What, the liar's paradox?
No, did he answer?
Oh, did the guy answer? Yeah, he answered the question.
Okay, thank you.
I answered the question.
You say yes or no?
Where's this money gone?
Okay, sir.
Where's this money gone? Why do you lie? Why do you lie? That looked terrible, man.
Okay.
You got that on camera. We had a contract which is broken. Can I get a copy of that?
Okay, so here,
We had
the question,
contract.
let's go back to the question I asked.
He would give me
No,
money.
it's good.
He said yes, no, yes.
No, it's
The
not
fact
good.
that he thinks this
It's
is
not
good, again, just reflects that he's just not with it at all here, right? I don't know what's happened here. I can only, like I say, this was probably the most epic fail that I've ever seen with hijab, which is, again, not difficult because I think he's failed many times. I know Reactionary might disagree, but this is epic, right? And even if you're a Muslim, you would probably you'd be a bit embarrassed by this, right? He says, no, this is good. The fact that he thinks it's good, the only thing that I think he's trying to get, the other guy unfortunately started to get a little bit excited here, and I think that's the only thing that might try and save him here, right? And if you look at some of the comments, they were all going, he's getting excited, blah, blah, blah. They forgot about the fact that the answer was correct and hijab didn't give the money. That's the important part here. The rest is kind of a little bit of, antics going on.
Yes, no. I answered, and he's lied. There's nothing left here, man.
This is called the
It's
live
done.
feed.
I'm sorry.
Okay, goodbye. Now, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, it's not quite over yet because he's now going to try and save himself to the camera. The other guy will come back and actually give an articulation. And I want everybody who's listening to see which articulation, if you've been following from the beginning, which one do you think more accurately represents what actually happened?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the oldest question in philosophy. It's called the liar paradox. It's never been answered, right? And no one has an answer for it.
Well, I tell you what, you can...
Excuse me, you can leave. You can leave, sir. You're acting weird. Let me explain what happened here, ladies and gentlemen. It's still rolling. I'm discussing. Ladies, what happened here today? He asked me the question: if God knows, does God know that? Does God know that what God knows is best? Yeah.
No. What he actually asked is, how does God know what God knows is best? And you can see that, he's not able to remember now. He's completely brain fried at this stage, right? So now we're just going to get sort of a rambling response in an attempt to save face.
Said to him, your question, in and of itself, is intrinsically circular. So he didn't understand what I meant. So I gave him a genuine, paradoxical example of another question that has no meaning. So I said...
No. The question he asked you has entire meaning. He's trying to establish from you, how do you determine what God knows is, or how does God determine that what he knows is good? And if you simply say, because he knows all things, that doesn't mean it. You could have a malevolent God, i.e. you could have an evil God that knows all things, that is saying things to you or telling you to do things that are evil. How do you establish a difference between an utterance from this God that makes a command? How do you know that it's not an evil thing? If you don't have access to God's nature, or you're going to appeal to faith, well, then you don't know. Then you've got absolutely no basis to make that claim other than it's complete faith-based. But if you are going to appeal or make an argument, then you have to overcome the argument which says, but Satan could be acting as God telling you that. If you can overcome that statement, now you've got something substantial. I've never heard an argument, certainly from a Muslim at least, I've never heard an argument that has remotely overcome that objection. And I don't think he's going to do it now either. In fact, I know he's not.
If a compulsive liar says I'm telling the truth, do you believe in him?
No, and that's not a paradox. So it's very straightforward. No, you don't believe in him. No paradox, not a problem, right? Had he said, if a compulsive liar says to you, this sentence is a lie, that would have been the paradox. You just got to...
You can Google this, ladies and gentlemen. This is called the liar paradox. It literally does not have an answer. Because why? If you say, yes, you believe in him, but he's a liar, how can you believe in a liar? If he says, I am telling the truth, and it's a true statement, then wait a minute, he's not a liar then, is he?
No.
He really doesn't
you wouldn't trust what he's saying. That's the point, right? So he's like totally confused. He knows that there's something called the liar's paradox. He's just completely confused about how to deliver it correctly. And of course, because of that, the other guy did answer the question correctly, and he didn't want to give the £5.
Okay, so whether you say yes or no, what? You lose. Do you understand?
Yes, that would be the case in the correct formulation. In the way you formulated, no. When you ask the question, would you trust him? The answer is no, that is correct. That answer is correct in the way you incorrectly formulated the quote paradox.
This is the meaning of a paradox, and the liar paradox is one of the most ancient philosophical questions, or that basically deals with this situation. When you hear people like this frantic man, this discombobulated man, this disheveled man, this man...
Okay, so now we're getting to ad hominems, and this is grandstanding. Again, presumably the Quran takes a poor view of this, or maybe it doesn't. Depends on, whose standard you're going to follow.
Yes, the Quran says very distinctively, do not call others by mean names, do not backbite, do not do this, do not do that. So that God is
16:125, isn't it? Stops?
No, that's
16:1.
No, it's different. No. That 16:25, never mind. We've gone past that long ago.
Yeah, but
I mean,
to be fair, again,
applicable.
I think he's referring to the arguments put forth by the man. So when he said
but it's in Quran 49:11. It very clearly says, "Do not insult one another and do not call each other by offensive nicknames."
Look, I was about to try and defend him, but he used the word disheveled. Disheveled. I can't say that's referring to his arguments.
No, exactly.
Man that was shaking, and he's literally shaking and trying to act in an arrogant way, but now he's been put in his place by me. Calm down.
Exactly. How has he done that? I'm still waiting for that part. Exactly. Yeah. And this is where, he's delusional.